Imagine yourself walking through an ancient temple, lit only by the soft glow of torches flickering against the wind. The marble columns stand in silence, yet whispers of the past echo through the stone. Every shadow seems to guard a secret. Every statue watches with unmoving eyes. It is within this sacred space of reverence and mystery that our journey begins. Today, we enter the story of a woman transformed into a monster, not because of her nature, but because of an injustice that crossed the ages. Her name still inspires fear, etched into stones and carved into masks, Medusa. But here, we will not simply repeat the myth as it appears in the books. Instead, we will part the curtains of time to see what no one tells you: the pain of metamorphosis, the burden of being hunted, and the forgotten meanings hidden within the serpents that crowned her head. As guardians of stories, we step forward together. And so, the first chapter opens. Before she was ever a monster, Medusa was human. Imagine yourself in her place, a young priestess, devoted to the goddess Athena, serving in temples filled with the scent of incense and the echoes of sacred hymns. Her vows were of purity and silence. The cold stone walls of the sanctuary offered both protection and the heavy weight of rules. Medusa was beautiful, too beautiful for the eyes of men. Her presence stirred desire and jealousy, as if beauty itself had become a curse she never chose to carry. At the very heart of her life was a cruel paradox. What should have been a blessing, the grace of her face, the radiance of her hair, became a sentence. The temple where she lived should have been a refuge. Yet it was there, beneath the shadow of Athena, that her ruin was sealed. The visit of a god, Poseidon, lord of the sea, changed everything. Where the ancient myths speak of an encounter, the hidden truth whispers of violence, an act of desecration upon the sacred. For the young woman, there was no defense. The sacred ground was violated. And yet, it was not the god who felt Athena's wrath. It was Medusa. The victim turned into the accused. Imagine that moment, before the goddess's judgment came, not as mercy, but as punishment. Athena, consumed either by fury or by the need to guard the sanctity of her temple, cast upon Medusa a dreadful spell. Her hair, once golden strands, became living serpents, hissing and writhing. Her eyes, once admired, now turned every gaze into stone. It was not only a physical transformation, it was a sentence of exile. Cast out from human company, Medusa wandered into the wildlands, beyond the reach of mortals, condemned to live in solitude. With every step, the memory of what she had lost followed her. The life of a priestess, the warmth of song, the brilliance of youth, all replaced by silence and pursuit. For wherever she went, she was feared. Hunters sought her head as a prize. Warriors dreamed of slaying her to prove their courage. Her very existence became an endless burden. To live in isolation, hated by some, desired as a trophy by others. Thus, the name Medusa was not born merely as a monster. It was born as the symbol of what it means to be turned into terror simply for existing. And so we close the first chapter, with Medusa wandering in the shadows of her curse. But stories never truly end. Like rivers flowing ever onward, our journey continues. And now, the second veil of the tale is drawn back. The biography of the myth, where Medusa meets her final fate in the hands of Perseus. The tale of Medusa, as it was told across generations, does not begin with her as a monster in the shadows, but as a daughter of ancient lineage. In some traditions, she was the child of primordial sea deities, Perseus and Ceto, born alongside her sisters, the Gorgons. In others, she was unique among them, the only one who was mortal, fragile, and destined to die. This difference matters, for in myth, every detail carries weight. Medusa's mortality made her vulnerable, but it also made her human. She was not an eternal figure, untouchable like the gods. She could suffer, she could bleed, she could perish. Her sisters, Steno and Euryale, were immortal. They stood with her in exile, guardians in the desolate edges of the world. Yet even their presence could not erase the curse she bore. Unlike them, Medusa carried the burden of beauty turned to terror, of humanity twisted into monstrosity. Enter Perseus, son of Zeus and Dano, a hero whose destiny was bound to Medusa's fate. His story begins far away, on the island of Seriphos, where his mother had sought refuge. King Polydex, desiring Dano, plotted to rid himself of her son, so he demanded that Perseus bring him a gift fit for a king. The head of Medusa, imagine the weight of that command, to hunt not a beast, but a woman cursed, dwelling beyond the reach of ordinary mortals. A task meant not to honor the king, but to ensure Perseus would never return. Yet in myth, when a mortal is chosen for an impossible task, the gods often intervene, and so it was with Perseus. Athena, whose temple had been desecrated, guided him. Hermes, the swift messenger, placed in his hands the curved blade that could sever even the most dreadful of beings. And from the nymphs of the north, Perseus received a helm of invisibility, winged sandals to carry him through the air, and a pouch to contain what he would take. But most important of all was the shield. Polished like a mirror, it allowed him to face Medusa without ever meeting her petrifying gaze. A weapon not of violence, but of reflection. And so Perseus traveled beyond the edges of the known world, across oceans and wastelands, to a land where night never lifted its veil. There, in a cavern hidden among jagged rocks, he found Medusa, Picture the scene. Serpents coiled and hissed upon her head, yet her face in slumber still carried the memory of the woman she had been. Around her lay the silent shapes of warriors, statues forever frozen in their final moments of courage and fear. Perseus did not confront her as one faces an enemy. He crept quietly, shield raised before him, moving as if in a dance with shadows, and with one swift stroke of Hermes' blade, he severed her head. From her blood, something miraculous occurred. Out of death came life. The winged horse Pegasus rose into the air, and Chrysaor, a warrior of golden blade, stepped forth. Medusa, even in her final breath, became a mother birthing symbols of beauty and strength from her cursed body. This is one of the mysteries of myth, that within tragedy lies creation, and within endings, beginnings. Perseus placed her head within the pouch, its power still undiminished. Wherever he traveled afterward, the head of Medusa remained both weapon and shield. With it, he turned enemies into stone, defended his mother from the advances of King Pegasus, and ultimately restored peace to his homeland. The head itself, however, was not his to keep. In time, Perseus gave it to Athena, and the goddess, who had once cursed Medusa, now bore her image proudly upon her shield, the aegis. A paradox of myth, where the victim's suffering became the weapon of the divine. And thus ends the central narrative as it has long been told. Medusa, slain by Perseus, her head wielded as a divine emblem. Yet beneath this familiar tale lies the deeper truth that Medusa was more than her death. She was a woman transformed by injustice. She was a symbol of fear, yet also of power. Even in silence, she gave birth to legends. The story of Perseus and Medusa is not merely one of heroism, but of contradiction, creation within destruction, triumph shadowed by tragedy, and the image of a goddess wearing upon her shield the very face she had once condemned. But myths are never only what they seem, they are veils, layered with meaning, and as we pass into the next part of our journey, we will step beyond the tale itself and explore the mysteries hidden within it. The symbolism of the Gorgon's head, the secrets of protection and terror, and the echoes of Medusa in the art and memory of civilizations. When a myth lingers for thousands of years, it is rarely only because of the tale itself. It endures because it speaks in symbols, shapes and images that echo across cultures, long after the story has been forgotten. Medusa is one such symbol. Her head, severed and lifeless, continued to hold power greater than her living body ever did. To the Greeks, the Gorgon's head was both curse and protection, both terror and guardian. It became what scholars call an apotropaic image, a sign meant to ward off evil. Imagine the walls of ancient temples and homes, decorated not with flowers but with the grimacing face of Medusa, her wide eyes frozen in fury, her mouth open in a scream, serpents hissing around her. These images were not meant to frighten those who lived within. They were meant to frighten away whatever threatened them from outside. A paradox emerges. Medusa the destroyer became Medusa the protector. Across Greece, artisans carved the face of the Gorgon onto shields, breastplates, and even the very stones of sacred spaces. The gaze that once petrified heroes became a sacred boundary, an image that could stop misfortune in its tracks. To where the Gorgon's image was, to where fear itself turned into armor. In this way, Medusa transcended her role in Perseus' story. She became something larger than a single myth. She became a universal emblem, invoked in times of danger. But what did Medusa mean? Truly, interpretations vary, and like the many coils of the serpents in her hair, the meanings intertwine. Some scholars see her as a representation of nature itself, wild, untamed, beautiful, and dangerous. To look upon her is to face the raw force of life and death, unfiltered, without the order imposed by gods and men. Others argue she is the embodiment of female rage, a figure demonized because of her power. In modern interpretations, Medusa is often reclaimed as a symbol of injustice, a woman punished not for her sins, but for surviving what was done to her. Still others see her serpents as ancient symbols of rebirth and transformation, echoing the shedding of skin and the cycles of renewal. In this light, Medusa's curse was also her initiation, a crossing from human fragility into something eternal. Archaeology, too, gives us glimpses of Medusa's endurance. In ruins scattered across Greece and beyond, fragments of her image remain. In Sicily, mosaics depict her face at the heart of grand villas, as if her gaze guarded the homes of the wealthy. In Rome, her image adorned coins, carried from hand to hand across the empire. Her myth turned into currency itself. In temples, she was carved at thresholds, a silent guardian between sacred and profane. Perhaps most striking is her presence in unexpected places, amulets worn by children, small terracotta faces placed in graves, charms buried beneath thresholds of ordinary houses. To the people of antiquity, Medusa was not only a story told in poetry, she was a companion in their daily lives, woven into the fabric of protection, superstition, and belief. For centuries, philosophers and poets wrestled with her image. Why should beauty become terror? Why should the victim become the monster? Ancient playwrights called her unspeakable, a force that could not be described in human terms. Renaissance painters softened her features, showing her as tragic and even mournful. as if to remind viewers that she was once a woman. In modern times, she has become an icon, not of horror, but of survival. Medusa's myth bends and reshapes itself to each generation that gazes upon her. She is never only what the story first told. She is memory, she is mirror, she is mystery. And so, in the play of shadows and meanings, Medusa ceases to be only a monster slain by Perseus. She becomes a symbol both feared and revered, used to guard doors, to protect warriors, to inspire poets, to stir debate centuries later. In this way, the story continues long after her death. Her severed head did not silence her. It made her eternal. But we have one final journey to make. For myths are never only about individuals. They are about the world that dreamed them. And so, in our last chapter, we turn to the society that shaped Medusa, to the rituals, the temples, the festivals, and the living breath of culture that kept her memory alive. Myths are not born in silence. They are born in the breath of societies, whispered by priests, painted by artisans, sung by poets. To understand Medusa, we must step beyond the cavern where she fell and into the living world that carried her memory. In Greece and later in Rome, the Gorgon was more than a tale. She was a presence. Her image haunted temples, guarded households, adorned weapons, and traveled across seas carved into the faces of coins. Walk with me to the great temples of antiquity. The Parthenon in Athens, a monument to Athena, bore sculpted figures of Gorgons upon its stones. Their fierce faces did not terrify worshippers. They defended them, keeping away envy, curses, and ill fortune. This was not unique to Athens. Across the Mediterranean, Gorgon faces were placed at entrances, on gates, on door lintels, even on the keystones of arches. To step beneath those eyes was to pass under protection, as if the house itself glared back at whatever evils lurked outside. In this way, Medusa became part of daily architecture, not in stories alone, but in stone. For the warriors of Greece, the Gorgon was more than a guardian of homes. She was a shield upon the battlefield. Her face, engraved upon breastplates or painted on round shields, was meant to strike fear before the clash of swords even began. Imagine two armies facing one another beneath the sun. Shields flash, helmets gleam, and among them, dozens of Gorgon faces stare across the lines. Not only soldiers fight, symbols fight too. The terror of Medusa, invoked on bronze, became a weapon as real as any spear. And at the heart of it stood Athena herself, her aegis blazing with the head of Medusa, carrying the paradox of the victim transformed into divine armor. Beyond the battlefield and the temple, the Gorgon appeared in ritual. Small terracotta masks of her face were buried under thresholds, hidden from sight, to guard against spirits. Children wore amulets shaped like her image, her gaze shielding them from envy and illness. Festivals, too, carried echoes of her power. In some regions, processions bore masks of the Gorgon, faces distorted into exaggerated grimaces. These were not mere entertainments, they were acts of protection, community rituals where laughter and fear intertwined. In these moments, Medusa was not only a figure of myth, she was a living force within the rhythm of society. When Rome rose to power, the Gorgon traveled with it. Roman villas displayed her mosaics at their entrances. Roman soldiers carried her image into far-off provinces, and Roman coins spread her face into markets from Spain to Syria. To hold a coin with Medusa's head was to touch not only silver, but story, a myth carried in the palm of the hand. Even as Christianity spread, echoes of the Gorgon endured, hidden within gargoyles on cathedrals, faces carved to protect sacred spaces from unseen evils. The myth had changed names, but not its essence. And so we see that Medusa was never only the figure slain in a cavern by a hero. She was woven into the very lives of people, guarding homes, protecting soldiers, blessing children, watching from temples and coins alike. Her legend was not only spoken, it was lived. With this, our final chapter draws to a close. But every ending in myth is only a doorway into reflection, and as we step away from the fires of ancient Greece and return to our own time, we carry with us a truth, that Medusa, once silenced, still speaks through stone, through art, through story. Myths, though ancient, are never silent. They move like rivers beneath the earth, resurfacing when the world is ready to hear them again. Tonight, you have walked the path of Medusa, from a maiden bound by vows of purity, to a victim punished by injustice, to a monster feared and hunted, to a guardian whose gaze protected temples, homes, and hearts. We have seen how Perseus raised his sword, and how from her death sprang winged Pegasus. Beauty born from tragedy, we have seen her face upon shields and coins, not as a tale of horror, but as a symbol of protection, of power that outlived her silence. We have heard the voices of modern interpreters, who look upon her not as a villain, but as a mirror of injustices faced by women through centuries. In her story they find courage, resilience, and the unbroken strength of survival. Medusa reminds us that myths are never just about gods and monsters. They are about us, our fears, our hopes, our longing to make sense of the world. To some, she is the terror of untamed nature. To others, she is the sacred protector, the ward against evil. And to many, she is the embodiment of a truth often hidden, that even those cast aside, misunderstood, or demonized, still hold a power that endures beyond their suffering. As we leave behind the temples and the oceans of myth, returning to the present moment, consider how her image still lingers around you, in a mask, in a statue, in a story retold. She is there. Her face, once cursed, has become timeless, and perhaps that is the final gift of Medusa, to remind us that no voice, however silenced, is ever lost forever. The story always finds its way back into the light. And so our journey ends, as all journeys must. But the myth endures, waiting for the next listener, the next seeker, the next dreamer who will sit by the fire of memory and hear her tale again. Until then, remember, every legend is a mirror, and within Medusa's gaze, perhaps we see not a monster but ourselves.